So a lot of the times when we think about fungus, we think about it as fungi friends, the fun guys, so to speak. Our pop culture is rife with these kind of nice, fun, anthropomorphic fungus that are running around. And probably a big reason that we see this is not just because of the cultural importance of fungi in our own lives, but also the important roles, the mutualistic, beneficial roles that fungus play, particularly when it comes to plants. And this kind of benefit is really derived from a very long evolutionary and intimate history that plants have with funguses. They're very different organisms. They have very key differences that they come out. Plants are on a completely different end of the eukaryotic tree than fungus are. Because remember, fungi are more closely related to you and I than they are to plants. But despite these kind of differences, they have a lot of things that are in common. They both have very close contact with soils, and within these soils, fungi and roots tend to kind of interact quite a bit. And through modern research, we're finding more and more that the fungal communities that live on the green parts of plants are also really common and probably play just as vital role in keeping plants healthy as they do in those root parts. They also do play a lot of antagonistic roles with plants, which we'll also talk about in another lecture this week. Probably when we think about plant and fungi interactions, the most important interaction we talk about are the interaction called mycorrhizae. And mycorrhizae is a Latin term for just literally means fungus roots. And what it is it's a symbiotic association between the fungus in the soil and plant roots. And this is pretty much a mutually beneficial relationship to these. These relationships are formed by a very diverse array of fungi. Almost every one of those three main orders or phylums that we've talked about can form these mycorrhizal associations. As well as almost every plant on our planet has been found to have these relationships that growing fungi intimately with their roots. With the very notable exception of two major plant families, the sedge family, the Cyperaceae, and the mustard family, the Brassicaceae. And there's no clear reason why we don't find these mycorrhizal associations with these plant families. Mycorrhiza is often termed as a mutualistic relationship because both members of this symbiosis are benefiting from it. Plants, from having these fungus around their roots, they're going to be able to absorb much more water from the soil. They have increased elemental uptake, so that the elements in the soil that they need to do things such as put magnesium into their chlorophyll are increased, as well as mycorrhiza offers increased protection by surrounding the root and also telling the plant to produce certain chemical compounds that can defend itself against herbivores. The fungi, on the other hand, they're going to get carbohydrates from the plant, especially things like photosynthesis that are produced by the plant. Some of that photosynthate can be transferred into that fungus, as well as certain vitamin elements that plants are unique at making. They can transfer that into these partnerships. And so these are very much a source of kind of give and take during this relationship. But it's important to think about these relationships, these mycorrhizal relationships, as both sources and sinks for things. And when we talk about sources and sinks in plants and any living thing, what we really have to consider is the balance sheet of what's getting what in this relationship. So a source is an area that has lots of material. So for instance, in the mycorrhizal relationship, the plant is a source of sugars. They produce a lot through photosynthesis, and they can transfer that. But in these relationships, we also have sinks, so areas where lots of materials are going to an area with low amounts. So again, if you think about sugars, the fungi aren't producing a lot of sugars. They're mainly using it. So they're going to serve as a sink in this relationship for it. And so we need to think about these mycorrhizal relationships in this context. Because, for instance, if a plant is doing fine with phosphorus and doesn't need to kind of use that mycorrhizae to uptake more if it's a phosphorus-rich environment, does it make sense for that plant to start sharing photosynthesis with that mycorrhizal partner? Because it could turn into they're just giving away free stuff and not getting much in return from having that partnership. So we primarily see two types of mycorrhizal relationships. The first one I want to talk about is the endomycorrhizal relationship. And this happens when the fungal hyphae, those kind of fungal strands, actually penetrate the root cells. So they're going to not only just be in close contact with the root, they're actually going to grow into the physical plant. And they do this through particular structures that we call arbuscules. And these arbuscules are going to physically move in from the soil into the roots and merge into the root cell. And they're going to produce further inside those root cells with a structure called vesicles. And it allows that fungus to live in very close, intimate contact and freely exchange material between the plant cells and their own cells. The other major way that we see mycorrhizal operates is through ectomycorrhiza. And ectomycorrhiza is mycorrhiza that's not going to penetrate like we did see in endomycorrhizae, but they're going to surround that root. And this is a really common form of mycorrhiza we see, especially in gymnosperms and kind of organisms that live in temperate areas. And those temperate areas generally see kind of these colder temperatures. So it's kind of theorized one of the reasons why we see ectomycorrhizae in these colder areas is because it gives them some kind of thermal protection by actually surrounding the root in a little bit. And so, but despite not penetrating the roots, the fungi in this relationship also do enter physically into the plant. But they're, instead of forming those vesicles inside the cells, they're going to surround the cells themselves. And they form this structure called a Hardig net. And interestingly in this relationship, we see it's mostly basidiomycotas that form these ectomycorrhizae, where in endomycorrhizae we see a much more different variety of fungal phylum that form them. Beyond these kind of two major groups of mycorrhizal relationships, we also see some very specialized coevolution that's probably happened to form very particular kinds of mycorrhizae. For instance, the orchid family, the Orchidaceae, they have to have fungus in order to actually germinate their seeds. Their seeds are lacking the endosperm that would normally support the embryo in that. And so this fungus starts off surrounding these seeds, and it's able to germinate them and provide that young seedling with nutrients to get it going, essentially. There's also a question, though, as a lot of these orchids grow, when they become adults, there's a little bit more question about whether or not they actually need this fungus long term, which is kind of a really exciting line of current research in orchid biology. Also, interestingly, the heath family, the Ericaceae, one of my personal favorite families with members such as blueberries and cranberries in it, they also tend to have very specialized mycorrhiza. In fact, we call this heath mycorrhiza because of this very important interaction. And what's really kind of fun about these is that we see the heath family tends to live in acidic soils. And in a lot of those acidic soils, nitrogen in particular tends to be limited or unavailable for the plant to use. And so it's been theorizing that this mycorrhizal, this very specific one, is essentially helping these plants live in acidic environments and uptake nitrogen in the soil. Because of the importance of mycorrhizae, a lot of our industries and a lot of our current research in plants and how they deal with their world has really focused on these very peculiar interactions. And a lot of times we try to, in our own human-dominated systems, encourage mycorrhizal relationships. When I buy soil for the greenhouse, a lot of times it comes with mycorrhizal enhanced bits in it. And this is intended to give a boost to the plants I'm trying to grow. Areas like forestry, for instance, are really considering managing soils a lot better because they want to make sure that there's a healthy fungal community in the soils in order to get them faster growing trees that are going to be healthier and provide better wood products. Agriculture has really depended on mycorrhizae, especially going in and spiking the soil and making sure that those fungal communities are really healthy. So to quickly review this lecture, the fungi and plants form very important mycorrhizal bonds that have severe implications for the ecology and agriculture of our world. But they also, we have to recognize, operate on a source-sink basis. So they might not be as beneficial all the time that we think they're going to be. And we see these operating as both endo, so the fungus is actually living inside the cells of the plants, and ecto mycorrhizae. So the fungi is surrounding the cells, but not actually penetrating them. And lastly, this is an important area to think about when we think about the role of plants in agriculture and overall plant health.